So I've conveniently put on my Clark Kent glasses today. I'm going to note as we go into this meeting, when we get to agenda item 7, I will be chairing it slightly differently to my normal approach. I just believe that I probably need a little bit more structure on that item, so we will come to that when we arrive at agenda item 7. But I will now open the meeting and to confirm the minutes and decisions of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any concerns to raise with meetings? No? Okay, I shall sign those. Next, we shall receive apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies? No? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Reynolds sends his apologies and is being substituted by Councillor Brian Pesson. And next we move on to declarations of interest. No interest to declare. Thank you. Okay. So our next item is public participation. However, due to the running order of the side, assuming that the public participation that's invited tonight is going to be on item 7, the call-in, I'm going to welcome the public to speak on that when we get to item 7. Okay, so moving on to action point 5, agenda item 5, action points from the previous meeting. There were no outstanding actions at the previous meeting, which brings us on to point 6, quarter 2 performance report, people and transformation. So I will pass over to Aidan.
Thank you, Chair. This is our standard regular quarterly performance update for people and transformation. I'm joined by Yvonne and Kelvin, who lead on 2 of the areas within my team. So I will look to just cover off briefly the people and transformation areas, and then hand over to Yvonne to cover off digital and IT, and Kelvin to give a very brief update on where we are on communications. Overall performance is not dissimilar to how it was the last time we met a quarter ago. If I look at people to start with, our sickness figures are a little bit worse than they were, but the underlying data tells us that that was driven primarily by a small number of additional long-term sickness cases, which are proceeding and indeed have proceeded to retirement through ill health. So we're confident that the next time we meet, the performance will have been brought back to a level that we've previously discussed around at this meeting. And that aligns with some other indicators that we use within the HR and people side around staff turnover, which continues to be very healthy, and within the parameters of what you would hope for within our sector. And our recruitment activity continues to be positive in a challenging market. Moving on to transformation, our key performance indicator there is around call waiting times. Those continue to be green and have been now for quite a considerable amount of time, which is very encouraging. Our work on complaints is continuing to have an impact, but we haven't quite reached our target levels. I see slightly more up-to-date data than is presented to this board, and the improvement journey continues, and the most recent monthly data that we've had is encouragingly green. So I'm crossing my fingers that next time we meet that we may be looking at slightly different colour than we are this time around, but we're moving in that direction. If I can hand over to Bonnie and then Kelvin, and then perhaps we can open up for questions after that.
Hi everyone. From a digital perspective, our core performance indicator is very robust, 97% 50% against a target of 90%, which tells me that our infrastructure is strong and resilient. Some really good work that's going on across the team. I've been and talked to you before about the kit that we're rolling out. We've now got around 20% of the kit rolled out, and I looked around the room earlier and quite a lot of it is here. And so that rollout's going quite well. We expect to finish that at the end of March 2025. We've rolled out new Wi-Fi across the forum and are doing that across the rest of the estate. And we anticipate finishing the Wi-Fi rollout ahead of December. And we've got docks going out across the estate as well on all to all of our other sites, again, before the end of December. The Bring Your Own Smartphone has been released, something that I know members have been waiting for. We do have a slight problem at the moment with our iPhone setup, just because Microsoft have changed the way that people log on, and we're redoing our user guide, but so far that seems to have gone well. And finally, the digital platform work is moving at pace now, and quite a few modules are in the build phase. So I will come back maybe in the next quarter to tell you a bit more about that. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. As per the report, we've continued to deliver against the external communications programme, supporting corporate projects and events across council services and partner organisations. Just to highlight a few key events over the last quarter, including the delivery of the 50th anniversary in September, which brought the whole community together in celebration of the borough's 50th anniversary. We've also continued to deliver against our internal communications programme, including delivery of the annual Staff Recognition Awards, building and recognising talent within the organisation. And a final brief mention about our programme of digital publications. So the last quarter, we've delivered 12 issues of our weekly Decorum Life digital newsletter, as well as 3 issues of our monthly Housing Matters newsletter and 3 issues of our monthly Business Matters newsletter, bringing news, information and events direct to residents, tenants and businesses directly. Thank you.
Right, do we have any questions from the floor? Councillor Elliott.
Right. Aidan, what's the priority 1 and 2 incident?
I think Bonnie can probably answer that more succinctly than I can.
A priority 1 incident is when the whole council goes out, so it's an IT that affects all of us. A priority 2 is it might affect a certain service, so it might be something that finance work on and the whole of finance go down. So they're quite critical incidents for us, and we take them very seriously.
Okay, and it was good to see the CSU call times have come down massively since last year, so well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Santa Maria.
Thank you, Chair. At what point will members be able to access the BYOS app?
Literally this week, we're working on it as hard as we can. I'm testing the app, the new user guide tonight. Actually, I started testing it. And I know a few of you have contacted me, and we'll be arranging sessions to go through the new user guide this week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. I see that amongst the three main contributors to sickness absence was musculoskeletal. I see that work's been done in waste services so that safe practices are in place and all this is identified. The report states on page 8 of the reports pack, under people, paragraph 15, that this should help with reducing musculoskeletal absences. But can this be quantified, and can the figures come to us at the next meeting?
Yes, obviously we'll continue to monitor the data behind it and hopefully be able to draw at least an indicative line between the actions that we're putting in place and the impact they have. Obviously, there's multiple things at play, so you can never be entirely certain of the direct impact, but we can certainly bring that back next time round.
Thank you. Move on to Councillor Weston.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's not a question. I just wanted, as usual, congratulate Aidan and his team. When I was working with them, they were doing a lot of this in my year, and especially Vonnie with the digital and ICT. I think Aidan and his team a credit to DBC, and I'd just like to put on record thank them, him and his team very much for their hard work. Thank you.
Noted. Don't think you need to respond, so we'll go on to Councillor Civil.
Stress and mental health related, absent. What is the percentage? Do you have it?
I don't have it, but I can find out and circulate it to the committee, if that would be useful.
Thanks. And just one question from me. I'm afraid the data on complaints is a bit vague, especially that we're still struggling with our levels there. Are you in a position to be able to give us some context on both of those KPIs, in particular, similar questions we've had in other quarters? What areas of the council are we receiving the most complaints, and more importantly, which areas are those that we struggle to be able to respond to them adequately with our current sort of processes?
So we can provide that data, and perhaps it'd be useful for the committee if we gave a bit of a deeper dive into that next time around. You won't be surprised to hear that housing accounts for a large proportion of our complaints, not least because we have such a large housing portfolio. However, there's a huge amount of work that's been done by that team to be able to deal with the volume of correspondence, of which complaints makes up some, and deliver those responses quickly, but also deliver good quality responses so that they don't escalate into the next stage of complaint. However, it probably makes sense for us to come back and give you a deeper dive into that, if you would find that useful, Chair.
Okay, I will just have a quick throw that open to the committee as an indicative as to use that. Obviously, the ideal situation is that our benchmarks are sort of set realistically so that the top line data is sort of what we need. Just I would say right at the moment, because we are so significantly adrift of where we wanted to be, understanding that right at the moment is important. Can I just get a quick raise of hands from the rest of the committee if we want to ask officers to do a deep dive into complaints for the next time that this report comes through to committee? Quick raise of hands would be fine. We have a small number. Okay, so that's roughly about half. So, okay, let's go. That would be useful. So, I'll have to skip ahead to the work programme to see when we're next due, which will be uh, 4th of March, it looks like, the next time we get the performance reports. Okay. We have a question from Councillor Duris. We'll entertain a visiting question.
Thank you. I'm not a member of this committee, but I hope you'll permit me to make 3 very brief comments or questions, if that's okay. Thank you very much. The first one actually follows on from the previous discussion with regard to complaints. On page 12, you've got the graphs and the numbers and the percentages, but the percentages don't really mean anything unless you actually tie them to numbers, because 9% of 10 could be quite small. 9% of 100 would be quite significant. So I think going forward, it's always very useful to have the numbers and the percentages at the same time to make a full picture. That's a comment. The second one is on page 12, item 6 with regard, page 6, item 12, with regard to Q2 social media statistics. With the greatest respect, to some extent, they're somewhat meaningless unless we actually know what Q1's social media stats were, and then Q4 and Q3. So on their own, I think they're just there. Going forward, it would be very useful to have the comparison with the previous 2 or 3 quarters. And then the final one, which is a little bit esoteric, on paragraph 20, there's a couple of things there. One is that the final bullet point talks about a new customer service training program. I would have liked to have seen that, bearing in mind customer service is a vital element to our performance, seen that at the first bullet point rather than the last bullet point. And the first bullet point happens to be the mandatory leadership development program for all managers. I would just question whether, what happens if a manager doesn't want to move into a leadership position? The word mandatory makes it indicate that they have to, but it may be that they don't want to. They may be happy where they are in a managerial role, but not a leadership role. They're my 3 points.
Noted. So I suspect that we need to come to Kelvin to comment on your second question, and then Aidan might come in on your final point.
Just to confirm that we will include the previous quarter figures with the next reports.
And similarly, yeah, we'll happily include the raw numbers to give greater clarity for members. And final point, yeah, customer service training, absolutely, we recognise it is critically important across the organisation. I guess on the first bullet point, we would view that managers are already in a leadership position. They are managing a team invariably, or responsible for a significant operational service, and therefore we think it is important for them to we think it's important for us to support them to be the best they can be at their roles. It has already been rolled out across much of the organisation in different tiers, and there hasn't been any pushback from anyone who doesn't want to be developed. So touch wood, hopefully it is being received very, very well by staff. If a member of staff was to say that they didn't want to take part of it, we'd obviously have a conversation with them. But I'm fairly confident that won't happen.
Thanks, Aidan. Thanks, Kelvin. So that will close agenda item 6 for the quarterly report. So thanks to officers, and I will now go into a little bit of a spiel as people are leaving, just to state that the call-in procedure isn't one that we regularly have had in this meeting before. So I've been given a script to use, and I do just want to say that when we move on to the part of this item where councillors will be able to pose questions in their councillor role, the main change that I'm going to make just for this item is councillors will get 1 question and 1 supplementary question, and then they will need to rejoin the queue. So you'll still be able to ask questions, but I will ask that we keep them succinct. That is for the councillors speaking, the councillors asking questions. We obviously have a couple of other parts of this item before we get on to that. So we now come to the call-in of the portfolio holder's decision, PH 02324, Parking Tariffs and Charges Policy Implementation. It was called in on the 9th of October by 5 councillors who are in attendance tonight, in accordance with the Constitution. The reasons for the call-in is set out in Appendix 2 of the report. The options made available to members once this debate has been concluded are set out in the recommendation section of the report, and we will be moving to a vote at the end of this item to see how we proceed. Before we move to inviting Councillor Alan Anderson to speak on behalf of the members who called in the matter, we do have a registered member of the public who would like to speak. So, Mr. Standen, we welcome you, and we invite you to address the committee.
Thank you, sir. As a resident in Wigginton, just to one side of the Tring, since 1996, I oppose certain aspects of the proposals. The consultation occurred over the extremely short 2-month period in the summer holiday season. It was in a document which contained various non-operational hyperlinks. Many of the public would have become confused and given up at this point. Councillors are kindly asked to investigate why officers were allowed to produce such a defective document. Tring is a small market town amid a farming community with several villages and hamlets. It has for many years enjoyed a 1-hour free parking, which has helped the convenience of shopping and the viability of its shops. The car parking in Tring is particularly important to residents of nearby villages such as Wigginton and Albury. People using the car parks will invariably visit more than one shop. Those visiting the dentist or hairdresser would not meet the proposed deadline. Reducing it to 45 minutes will place many shoppers in doubt as to whether they can do their shopping in time. Therefore, I submit that the 1-hour period should remain in force. The 45-minute period is thoroughly impractical. Finally, it is proposed to charge for a small number of high street parking bays in the north of the town, which are currently enjoy the 1-hour free. This too is objectionable. Making an increase in parking charges is one thing, but removing the 1-hour free is over the top and unreasonable. Respectfully, I ask you to agree with my concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Standen. I'm going to invite Councillor Anderson to speak on behalf of those who have called in the portfolio holder's decision. Then the officers, the portfolio holder, and possibly the leader of the council will respond to both yourself and to those who've called in. That's before we then move on to the debate. So thank you, and I'll move. I would now like to invite the councillors that called in the decision the opportunity to speak if they wish. We understand that Councillor Alan Anderson will speak on behalf of the members who called in the matter, and it's Councillor Alan Anderson, Alan Johnson, Councillor Graham Elliott, Councillor Terry Douris, and Councillor Julie Banks.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you've explained, I'll speak on behalf of all 5 members that called in the decision. The top line reason for calling the decision is because it was not taken on officer advice. It was taken without supporting evidence, and above all, we feel that it will harm the businesses in the borough. Now, this issue has been subject to lengthy discussion, but I think we do need to very briefly paraphrase where we are. Now, as Councillor Williams and I were both members of council deep in the midst of time when we decriminalised parking and took on parking management in the borough, we understand fully the reason for introducing parking charges but in certain locations where it is viable. And historically, over a long period of time, the council had parking tariff policies whereby it was heavily discounted in certain locations because of the economic realities of those locations, and they certainly weren't increased by inflation every year automatically. We have here a complete policy change where it's been decided that this should be charging across the whole borough and it should be the same. Respectfully, we suggest that just is not workable and is going to cause a lot of harm. Turning to King's Langley, specifically on behalf of myself and Councillor Johnson, the other ward member for King's Langley, we're not being political about this issue. We are genuinely extremely worried about the consequences for our high streets and the businesses therein. And it's it's not something that one can say, right, well, we'll trial it, see what happens, and then if something goes wrong, we'll compensate for it. You can't do that because it'd be too late. The businesses would have gone to the wall, the shops will be boarded up. It would be beyond what the council would not be able to afford the compensation. And I would suggest that even the council doesn't have the legal powers to compensate businesses for lost income. So I don't believe it is practical to believe that one could compensate for these changes if they go wrong. And to compare Kings Langley with Berkhamsted, Berkhamsted is a large town with a very high amount of viable footfall. Kings Langley is still a village, and we have our high street shops are on the knife edge. And it's something like this that could really cause and push them over the edge and actually make our businesses fail and lead to boarded up shops. And finally, on respect to Kings Langley, it is quite a short section of High Street, and it's being proposed to introduce not one but 3 different charging regimes. That, I would suggest, is just not practical or workable. But it's not just Kings Langley. If you look at the train, as the previous speaker has said, if you reduce the first 3 hours to 3/4 an hour, people will not be able to use the facilities they would be using in an hour. So it's actually a pointless exercise. Far from supporting businesses, these proposals would harm them, and certainly in King Langley's case, send a lot of them, destroy a lot of them. And it's not just councillors getting excited here. There's plenty of evidence. If you look at some of the articles that the British Retail Consortium has produced on the issue, it's fine introducing charges where it's viable. It is not fine doing it where it isn't. And that is a really big problem. Now, we suggest that, as those that are calling in, one of the big issues with this is it's not going to raise the funding that is being identified as the rationale for doing this. The amount of funding, you could leave out the Kings Langley and Tring changes without materially affecting the income that this site would do. And I, again, would appeal to the portfolio holder to consider that. But my bottom line in speaking, Chair, to wrap up, is to say that I appeal to the members of the committee to refer this matter to full council for further consideration. We feel this is the wrong decision and it will harm the Decorum's businesses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. So I'll now move to invite an initial response from the portfolio holder for corporate and commercial services and the leader of the council, and if required, we will refer to officers.
Thank you, Chair. I believe the portfolio holder is going to hang on until the end, but I have a couple of things to say now. Mr. Standen, thanks for coming. Really appreciate your contribution. I think I'm right in saying that the idea to reduce the Tring parking to 45 minutes is an idea which was tested briefly and then abandoned, possibly over a year ago. So I'm sorry if that has not been clear somehow, but you can rest assured that councillors managed to come to a conclusion themselves that that was a good idea not to go any further with that. There are some proposals here to charge on limited weight bays in the town centre. But that is primarily to indicate to shoppers, users of the town centre, that they should use the car parks if they want to have the free parking element, and the additional convenience of being able to park on the street right where you want to be is something that is therefore chargeable because there is an incremental value to it. Briefly on Councillor Anderson's comments, again, I think the point about Tring seems to have got lost in translation, or rather kept in translation somehow, because that was an idea that was briefly assessed, but not taken forward. What I would say more generally is that quite a lot is said and has been said in discourse about this issue, about the notional relationship between parking charges and retail decline. And retail decline couldn't really be much more of a challenge for a council like Dacorum, or indeed any other district council. Retail decline means that the town centre, the high street, the village centre is no longer so much a storehouse, but more of a community social hub, a place for people, less for bags and boxes. Community hubs need to thrive for the community, and they need to thrive for the way that the local government is currently funded, because local government is currently funded 48% of its income comes from fees and charges, of which car parking is a really significant element. So if local community hubs or town centres or village centres or high streets are to be sustained, then there needs to be some income coming from somewhere to enable those programmes to be funded and to be done. And otherwise, parking and town centres just become a commodity, and they become the absolute antithesis of what we all want them to be. So in relation to this administration, it's fair to say that after a false start in summer of 2023, the new administration worked hard through the summer and the autumn 2023 to rework a version which, while focused on the inflation gap, which had opened up, also listened and maintained some salient free parking, most particularly in Tring, but also in other smaller centres. The new portfolio holder in autumn, Councillor Capozzi, brought what I thought was a measured perspective to this knotty problem. And by February, all the council agreed, I checked the tape last night, all the council agreed that it was an improvement. So the new cabinet was under a further twist of pressure to consider the economic and the fairness rationale for keeping car parking free in some places while keeping down overall rises. So yes, we should all consider that it is true that the risk to some of the high street in general was actually worsened by the inequality present in the system that we had. The lack of equity across the piece meant that in some places the high street was being damaged by that inequality for all the good intent. Also, we all agree that this work, as soon as it is delivered, solves the key problem in Kings Langley, because by limiting the free parking in the car parks to 4 hours, it means that you don't have people just parking there all day and taking up space which is needed by the retailers. There's a very particular problem that when a car park is full, there is no free parking left in Kings Langley. So when all the spaces are gone, there is no free parking in Kings Langley. So what do the businesses do then? If those free spaces are taken by people who are not shopping, then that high street is damaged, and that's happening now. And finally, all of this policy making is being done in the dark. When parking is free, there is absolutely no data to show when a full car park might, in reality, be just as bad for business as an empty one. So parking is currently part of this dynamic of, while retail is changing, it's a moving target. But with inflation as it has been, it's not a moving target that we can exclude. And what I would simply say is that the reason that we need to implement these parking charges is because if we don't, the council will be £500,000 down.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, do you have any further comments?
Yes, if I may, about the the point Councillor England's made about the availability of parking. I've been keeping an eye on Kings Langley Matters on Facebook, and there are complaints within the village that the long-term parkers clog up the high street for the shoppers. And the intention of a lot of what is being planned with the parking charges in Kings Langley, being specific because that was Councillor Anderson's focus, is that it provides a variety of parking. You've got 4 hours of free parking within only a few minutes walk of the high street. The on-street parking, half of it will be free still for half an hour. I went to Kings Langley a few days ago, and in half an hour, having parked in one of the peripheral parking spaces that will still be half an hour free, I was able to go to the post office, the chemist, the spa, even have a little browse in the model shop and have time for a coffee. If you need to do more than that on Kings Langley High Street, there is 4 hours of free parking in the NAP, which will be more available because the commuters, the car sharers, the residents, the carers in the local care homes will not be there all day long filling up those spaces. So the intention is that there'll be a more versatile and varied approach to parking, which will meet a very wide range of different needs. People who need to be there for a quick, dare I say, smash and grab shop, just grabbing a few things on the way to work or on their way home, are able to do that within half an hour. If you need more than half an hour because you're having a meal or you're going to believe there's a curtain shop, then there is longer term parking available. So I do see the concerns of the colleagues who have called this in and do appreciate those concerns. However, those concerns are partially met by some of the changes that are being proposed by this paper.
Thanks, Councillor Allen and Councillor England. Ben, apologies, but by the simple omission, could I turn to you to address the public's question with regards to the broken links in the consultation during the last opening, please?
Thank you, Chair. I very quickly looked at the consultation results and the data that was provided to me by colleagues in comms. There were 3 separate consultations that were carried out during this period, one for on-street, one for off-street, and one for controlled parking zone. There were 1,577 visits to the consultation platform, and there were just over 500 responses. I had heard that some of the links weren't working. However, the data demonstrates that clearly the links were working. That's not to say there weren't issues with the how the individual was perhaps trying to click on those links and whether they had got internet access at that time. But the fact that there is a substantial response rate on the consultation demonstrates that the links were working.
Thanks, Ben. I will now open this up to the committee and take questions from the floor, and we'll begin with Councillor Deacon.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me. I've got a very sore throat. I do take on board Councillor Anderson's concerns and comments. I live in Nashville, so Kings Langley High Street is very close to me because I go there quite often. I do get frustrated that I can never find a car park space to get my lovely sandwich in a shop there that's recently opened. And I do sometimes wonder who's actually parking on the high street because it doesn't actually look like shoppers. So I was thinking that this this could help. Based on page 28 of 29 people in Kings Langley did make an effort to put in some objections about this, and only 3 of the 29, that's obviously just slightly over 10%, thought it would impact business. The other points were, on different reasons, such as inconvenience. And based on the financial complications of us delaying this for much longer, I hope that this is something that I can't see the evidence of a clear reason of delaying this, but hopefully this could be implemented with a view to maybe reviewing in a year's time.
Thank you. Ben, at the risk of getting of you repeating what you told us many times at the beginning of last year, can you just answer Councillor Deacon with a quick recap of the difficulties of reviewing parking charges each year, please?
There is a time frame that's involved in reviewing parking tariffs and indeed charging policies. They need to be put into a traffic regulation order. If it's just tariffs we're looking at, and we are just looking at changing, excuse me, those tariffs, and not introducing new tariffs or not changing the times of those tariffs, then we can do a variation order, which is a much quicker process for carrying out the, instead of undertaking a full consultation. However, we still need to get traffic regulation orders involved, and still need to get Herts County Council and other third-party organisations such as the emergency services to agree to any changes that we make in, certainly in on-street locations. So it isn't, and that's without obviously ensuring that members get an agreement before either undertaking a statutory consultation or a variation order. So it is a long drawn out process, or certainly can be, as the previous couple of years have shown. But the decision as to how often the council looks at and reviews its parking charges or its parking tariffs and charging policies is clearly up to the council and members to decide.
Thanks, Ben, and I appreciate the trepidation in your voice there. I know you've had to say that a number of times, but I just thought there was quite a few new people in the room today.
Right, can I seek clarification on the point made by Councillor Deacon? I think he said, if I heard him right, that Kings Langley, there's only 3 objections to the effect on business on the agenda. If I turn to page 33 of the agenda, there was 223 objectors who commented on the effect on businesses. I think to suggest there's only 3 is severely misleading the meeting.
Okay, I will refer that back to details on consultation. Just thinking if that is in the report. So I suspect that for procedurally, I will just need to note that and refer to the data that is in the report, unless Councillor Deacon wants to attest that data. So we'll move immediately on to the next question, which is Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to clarify, is this questions at the moment, or is it the debate?
It's questions.
Right, I'll hold fire until the debate.
Okay, then we'll move on to Councillor Santa Maria.
Thank you, Chair. On page, sorry, I've lost it now because I went to look for the data. At the end of the report, it refers to us considering equalities and the effect on particular groups. I would just like to raise, because the concerns that have been brought to me have largely not been from local businesses within Hemel, but rather from disabled people and carers who will be negatively affected by the changes in regulations. They are often more severely affected financially by the cost of living crisis, as many will already be on a low income, as they'll be on disability benefits, carers allowance, personal independence payment, etc. Is it possible, so my question is it possible for us to have some form of exemptions for blue badge holders and registered carers?
I will pass that to Ben.
Thank you, Chair. In all of the council's car parks, no blue badge holder has to pay. It's free of charge, even if it's not within a blue badge bay. As long as they are displaying the blue badge, then that's free. There are certain limitations in on-street locations. The majority of the time, blue badge holders can park for a set period of time, but they'd need to be aware of what those local restrictions are in force at that time.
Can I come back with a supplementary question?
Oh, supplementary, yep.
So the particular examples I've been given is a carer who was able to park, I think possibly on Sundays for I think they're mentioned in the report, who was able to park for an unlimited time and now will be restricted. And there's also it's not actually in my ward, but they got in touch with me because they thought I was the councillor. But on Cemetery Hill, there's a church which has a lot of events throughout the week. Often they're all day and they have very limited on-site parking, and a lot of their service users are disabled. So they're now not going to have really any option of places to park within walking distance.
Thank you, Chair. So in relation to South Hill Church, there is ample parking at the rear of South Hill Church, should South Hill Church choose not to allow their staff to park there, and those staff could park elsewhere. The more able-bodied members of staff could park in car parks, such as the Water Gardens car parks, and could walk up, which would then enable the car park at the rear of South Hill Church to be used for blue badge holders or people that have got mobility issues.
Thank you. Do I have any more questions from the floor? Because otherwise we're going to move the questions up to Councillor Elliott and myself. Oh, no, Councillor Santamaria has another question.
I'm just joining the back of the queue again.
In order to progress things, what I'm trying to do is get all of the questions from the floor first, and then the chair and vice chair, other way around, can ask questions. Then we'll move on to the debate point. So you may ask a question. I'm just trying very much to keep things impartial.
I think I'll come back in the debate because it's not so much of a question.
Okay, fine. So Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor England mentioned shops to be damaged by inequality. What does he mean by that, and has he any evidence of that would happen?
Thank you. What I was referring to is that, as I think one other speaker mentioned, at the moment we have, I think it was Councillor Williams, at the moment we have heavy discounting in certain areas, which means in some areas there is discounting, in other areas there isn't, ergo inequality. And if that discounting is perfectly matched to the market, then it's not a problem. But we have virtually no data, so we don't know that it's perfectly matched to the market. So what we're seeking to do is, when ANPR comes along, then we'll have better chance. And if we have a greater element of charging, which is necessary in any case, then it will also give us more data on some of these data deserts that we currently have.
Okay. Supplemental, I don't know if that's to Councillor Allen or Councillor England, but you mentioned that it would stop long-term parking in Kings Island High Street, such as care workers. Does that not smack of inequality, since care workers are usually low paid and You know, and you're penalising people that are very much part of and crucial to our society, rather than people popping in for a sandwich into the high street.
I do qualify that as care workers working in the local care homes. So there aren't people popping in and out.
No,
But yes, you have got a point that the parking needs to work for the people who work in the shops and the businesses in any community. There is a lot of off-street parking in addition to the NAP and the bottom of Langley Hill car parks. There is a lot of on-street parking in the residential roads in Kings Langley, which is still free, no control parking zones. So there is plenty of free parking in Kings Langley.
Okay, a couple of questions from me, coming to yourself, Ben. So we've mentioned a bit of, Adrian's just used the wonderful term, desert of data. I know in the past we haven't been able to produce particularly good information on where people are parking and who is parking in those places. So I was wondering whether with big data, we should always be able to see what the license plates of people that are parking or that are paid to park are. And we should be able to cross-reference that with where that vehicle is registered to be able to understand, first of all, how many, which cars are coming from outside of decorum to park in our places, and also we would be able to look at it in terms of towns as well. So we'd be able to see, you know, I would strongly suspect, for example, most people that pay to park in Berkhamsted are probably from outside of Berkhamsted. So my first question is, have we looked at addressing that data, and what sort of cost might we be looking at if we were to get data that would make our decisions useful?
Thank you, Chair. I'll answer that question first. We have to be very careful. We certainly hold data in car parks where there are paid for parking sessions because the customers need to put their registration number in. In car parks where they're free, or for instance, for car parks that are free or there's no pay to park, people don't need to put their information in any pay to park machine, so we don't gather that data, which is difficult. In terms of the data that we do hold, we are unable to look at where those vehicles are have come from, are registered from. That data is held by the DVLA, and we can't access that data unless we are looking to enforce a penalty. So we would not be able to have access to the DVLA database on that. Is certainly my understanding. So I think a new parking enforcement contract will be let next year. We are, as part of that, the re-tendering, we're looking at some smart technology. So there will be much more, hopefully, much more ability to gather data and to use that data, but we would still be restricted in terms of where the vehicles are registered. We wouldn't be able to hold that information. But you could certainly look at some analysis in terms of the vehicles, in terms of their registration numbers, and how often they are within the certain car parks. But it would be impossible for us to say if they've come from within or outside of the borough.
So just to clarify, the reason that we can't get hold of the registered address, is that because that information is sort of protected by the DVLA, or is it something just that we would need to purchase?
No, it's protected by the DVLA.
Okay. So my supplementary, which sort of goes on to what you're saying before, a key piece of strategy, I'll use that word, behind this paper was we've sort of identified that because parking charges haven't been increased for 5 years, that at the moment, residents of decorum are very much subsidising vehicles parking in decorum. But we haven't been able to identify whether that's two separate groups of people or how much of the overlap that there is. So you are now saying that that we are expecting that we will be able to do that to some macro level.
I think we will be able to do some analysis. Whether it is 100% correct, I couldn't say. But I think it will be easier for us to gather data in areas where we aren't able to gather it at the moment. So if I take Kings Langley, for instance, the 4-hour maximum stay, people will, although it's still free, will need to put their vehicle details in when they arrive so that we can see how long the vehicles have been there to ensure that they're not overstaying the maximum stay. So we will gather data in areas that we're not able to at the moment. And we will be able to look at that and analyse it in particular ways. Whether that will show us as much trend information as we would like it to, I don't know at this stage. But I know we are definitely looking at some of the trends of the length of stay in certain areas and towns. And then hopefully we can start to identify the types of vehicles and on whether they are low or high emission vehicles.
Okay, we'll come back to Councillor Elliott.
Right, okay. Councillor England mentioned how pleased he was with Councillor Capose's decision sheet. Can I take you to, it's actually page 20, and it mentions that this is all you basically at the top, whilst also recognising the desire to support town and village centre shops. How do these parking increases support the town centres and village shops? It stops people parking.
I think Councillor Allen will need to respond to that one.
Sorry, Councillor Elliott, I thought you were addressing that to Councillor
Well, it was a comment that Councillor England made, so I'm happy for you to answer it.
Could you just repeat the question?
Well, it's the portfolio decision, and it's page 20, and it's basically saying that you recognise the desire to support town and village centre shops. Mm-hmm. Now, I just can't see how parking increases can support town centre shops if the footfall decreases and they go out of business.
So the parking strategy has been developed as part of a whole place strategy across the borough, as part of all of the place work that's been done on the local plan and Hemel Garden communities. The parking, of course, is just one aspect of a relationship between the borough and the high street or a village community. And the parking strategy has been has had an eye on making sure that the parking arrangements both interact effectively with the other place building mechanisms that borough employs, such as you'll have seen the monsters on the roof of the Marlows, the other things that happen to promote the high street. So, yeah. The parking has been designed so that there's a logic to it, that the peripheral car parking areas in Tring, Berkhamsted and Kings Langley are still kept free. That's on-street parking. The close to town centre or village centre introduces a charge. That charge is designed to try and make sure that there's a churn of parkers coming to these shops. A lot of these shops are short transactional shops. But alongside that, for those people who want longer transactions, hairdressers, or they're stopping for a meal or whatever, there is parking available. I think one of the call-ins said that they were worried about the loss of free parking. All of the free parking that is currently free will still be free, maybe for a shorter period, but there will still be free parking in Kings Langley, Cowper Road, Boxmoor, Tring Forge, etc. So this is all about trying to create a range of solutions that work for the high street as part of a wider strategy. Within this, what we'd also like to introduce is is to look at what else can be done for the villagers within that. There's a lot of placemaking research that suggests that parking isn't necessarily the prime concern of shopkeepers. Transport, open space, variety and vibrancy, and so on can be other important factors in making sure that a high street thrives. And we're very keen as part of the place strategy to make sure that we address those issues as well by making sure that there's events. We're coming up to the Christmas light turning on season. We've been doing a lot of work with new neighbourhood shops. Highfield, for example, last year, I think Bennett's End as well, had their first Christmas lights. That's all part of trying to get people more engaged with their local community shops, be it a village or a neighbourhood. So I think that's tried to address your question.
Sorry.
If I could carry on, I mean, we're talking about, Ben was talking about data, and there was talk earlier about reviews. We will, of course, be monitoring this extremely closely. We don't want there to be unforeseen consequences on any high streets within the borough. So the data that we're able to gather will be able to inform a more refined approach if necessary, and we'll be reviewing this. It's not something that we're just going to leave untouched for another however many years until we've got the resources to go through another TRO process. We will, of course, be looking at it and responding promptly to any issues that occur. Now, that response could be after a year, having a review of the data and seeing what it tells us, but it can be more immediate than that. If we see that there is a undesired and unexpected downturn on any high street, then we do have the powers to be able to suspend parking charges in certain places on the basis of evidence. So, you know, this isn't just being done as a random act. This is being done as part of a strategy, and we will have in place a tier of interventions that support what we're doing, but also can respond if unforeseen problems arise.
I've got a supplemental, if you don't mind.
I don't. I just want to check. Does Councillor Capozzi wanting to speak in response to this question?
Yeah.
Yes. So I will invite you to come in.
Thank you. Thank you. Just very briefly, I just wanted to say that it should be noted that this decision is actually a second proposal, because the first one was came to this committee was in July 23, and this proposal has changed greatly compared to that one that came to us initially, and that was based on both councillor and public consultation feedback as well. And so absolutely the line about supporting town and village centre shops, that should also say, sorry, the next line does say as well, nighttime business economy, because there had been a proposal to have charging up until 10 p.m, if I remember correctly, which we all felt would, regardless of how big the town or the village centre was, our restaurants and our bars, etc., you know, were going to potentially suffer from that. And so there's been huge changes between that first proposal and this one. So very much those three things on page 20, I feel this proposal supports those statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Capozzi. Councillor Elliott.
So basically, the first proposal was all thought through. The third point, to provide freedom and flexibility to shoppers. What does that actually mean on the portfolio holder?
Well, that's what I was talking about, the various tariffs and arrangements. Immediately close to shops on the high street, there's 12 bays in Tring, for example. I think it's 40 odd bays in Kings Langley, will have short-term parking charges. The peripheral ones to high streets, which is what applies in Berkhamsted currently, those will still have a free tariff. So if we just keep using Kings Langley as an example, if it's helpful, between Rectory Road and Vicarage Road, sorry, Langley Hill and Vicarage Road will be paid for short-term parking. Beyond those, will be half an hour free. Now, the bits beyond are really not that much further from the core of the village. It's, I described my little shopping strip, and I forgot to mention I also popped into the rather good butchers. So then if you don't need, if you need longer than the half an hour free, then there's the 4 hours free parking in the nap and at the bottom of Vicarage Road. Langley Hill. Getting my Kings Langley roads muddled up. So at the bottom of Langley Hill, and then as I said earlier, there is free on-street parking on residential roads further afield. So there's a whole range of different options there for people who engage with a shopping high street in a range of different ways. Popping in, wanting longer, or needing to be there all day because they're employed by one of the care homes.
Thank you.
And if I might add, Chair, I'm in a happy position to say that both Councillor Williams and Councillor Deacon are correct. Councillor Deacon is talking about the consultation with off-street parking, and Councillor Williams is talking about the consultation on on-street parking.
Thank you for that clarification. So with that said, I believe we've now completed our round of questions. So I will invite us to make comments for debate before we get sort of final summations from people. So Councillor Santamaria wanted to have a comment, as did Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to come back to my earlier point I was making with regards to the South Hill Centre, although I appreciate what Ben has said about the parking in the car park, given the fact that it's a church and it's largely used by voluntary organisations, I don't know that that's going to be that practical for them, as presumably they'd have to reimburse volunteers and possibly staff for parking there. I appreciate the need for a modal shift, but if you're reliant on volunteers, it's not always possible to recruit them from within walking distance, and public transport may well not be reliable enough for them to use to get there on time if they need to be there for a particular shift. They may also have disabled staff and volunteers who would need to use the car park themselves, and they're likely to have more disabled users than the general population due to the type of activities that are on offer there. Again, South Hill Centre is not actually in my ward, but it does border my ward and is used by a lot of my residents. Hopefully Councillor Allen has had representations made from the organisations as one of the Boxmoor ward councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. The decision to increase parking charges by this amount is the wrong decision. It's wrong because of the adverse impact it will have on shoppers and businesses. It is a basic law of economics that as you increase the price of a product or service, the income will increase until you reach a point where the income falls because customers are put off. Parking charges could be increased to the point where shoppers choose not to come into Hemel Hempstead Town Centre or any of the other locations in which they're being increased. And this would not only have an adverse impact on them, it would adversely impact the businesses of Hemel Hempstead and of Tring, Berkhamsted and Kings Langley because of reduced footfall. Businesses have suffered enough with COVID, and they will suffer more with the government's increase in national insurance contributions for employers and the threshold on which employee earnings for national insurance are paid by employers being decreased. The increase in parking charges is another risk to business. The council may be able to suspend parking charges if there is a problem, but that will be too late after businesses have already gone bust. Parking charges increased to this level are bad for business, bad for customers, and bad for the borough.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, this, as I think it's been alluded to, this car parking report has been kicking around since July 23. Hastily conceived, I think, in about 3 weeks from the new administration coming into the report being written ready for scrutiny. Not based on any sort of data or information about car parking, purely the new administration seeing a quick £600,000 cash grab, which was well in excess of what was necessary in the budget if you read the report from July 23. Obviously didn't receive a very good hearing in July, and it's been subject to 4 portfolio holders and several reiterations since, with the original discharge in every car park, discharge in every high street, including Gatebridge Park and Hemel Old Town. This take away the 3-hour in Tring and elsewhere. All those, some of those more contentious parts of it have had to be whittled away, I suspect, to keep it on track with the then majority group. And we get back to where we are now, with a lot of the harmful aspects of the original proposals purely driven by more of a dislike of the motorist than anything else. But we still have, and whilst we would have concerns around the 28% increase in tariffs, that's not primarily the issue which we focus on here this evening in relation to the call-in. It's the minor changes around some of the smaller aspects of the policy which we think have disproportionately significant effects. And we've spoken very much here about Kings Langley this evening and a little bit about Tring, but there are other changes which I think are in themselves don't seem particularly significant, but I think the effects of them are potentially more significant than they appear in the report. So, for example, the reduction of the 1 hour waiting in Hemel Old Town to 30 minutes. I went for breakfast the other morning in the Old Town. We drove it up there by chance, found a space on the street, stopped for breakfast. We couldn't eat breakfast in 30 minutes, but we could have breakfast in an hour. If that parking space was restricted to 30 minutes, we simply wouldn't have stopped. We'd gone somewhere where we could park for more than 30 minutes. So then there is combined with the 28% increase in tariffs, is the removal of the 1 hour tariff. So in somewhere like Hemel Old Town, that means the minimum charge to park in the car park rises by 120%. And that's a common theme across most of the car parks, except in Tring, of course, where the first hour remains free. The rest of the borough, the minimum charges for parking are rising by up to or around 100% by the removal of the 1 hour tariff. Now, in some parts of the borough, maybe in Berkhamsted, that is, the retail environment may support that. Suggestion we made because of the fragile retail environment, particularly in Hemel Hempstead and in the Old Town, that is in the 3 car parks in Hemel Hempstead. Water Garden South is already the most expensive car park in the borough anyway. Is that the Water Garden South, Water Gardens North and Hemel Old Town retain the 1 hour tariff. We know that over 50% of people who buy tickets in the Water Gardens buy a 1 hour ticket. They're coming in, they're popping into town, doing something quick. We can't afford to discourage those shoppers from coming into Hemel. The retail environment is fragile enough as it is. So the minor suggestions we made would make a change to the income suggestions, but we have consistently opposed bad policy. This isn't a good policy, and we don't feel that simply because it will cost something to make that bad policy better, we should support bad policy. So we will continue what I'm hearing this evening, particularly from the 2 portfolio holders, is we're sympathetic to the comments. But we're going to ignore the 3,800 people who signed a petition in Kings Langley. We're going to press ahead anyway and whatever damage it does, it can do. So we would move that this matter should be referred to full council, for full council to consider in a proper debate the significant implications of some aspects of this policy. And that would be the proposal from this group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Silwell.
Right. Okay. 2.2.1, there are 3 potential outcomes from this finance committee. As Andrew said, is referred to the full council. Either way, this will go through, I believe, because numbers, let's say. There was 3,000 people or visited council consultation platform. 82% no comments or maybe support or I don't know, but objected was 17.94. I calculated here, 538 objected. Off streets 146, on streets 372, control zone is 20. It seems, I know this is, I think 5 years hasn't been increased. I wish it's a free all the way, it's a borough, it's a free parking, but it doesn't happen. Yeah, it's a full council will be more discussion there.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to make a few points. I've listened to Councillor Williams' most recent comment there, but I think we've got to revisit the whole question of parking anyway, and I think it's too late at this stage. Going back in history, and I believe Councillor Williams was rewriting the most recent history, the report that was delivered to us when we took over the administration had already been on the stocks since the spring. We inherited what was being proposed, and what was being proposed was a dreadful plan. And it's taken a huge amount of work to try and remedy most of the deficiencies. I'm very sympathetic to this issue of not having charges for parking in high streets. But parking charges have been levied up and down the country. And I think we've got to ask the reason why this has been the case. For well over a decade, councils have had to diversify their sources of income. And I can well remember the comment by a former portfolio holder about a decade or so ago, making the point, why should people have free parking on the high streets? They should be being able to charge them a reasonable fee should be the norm. And I think that has driven policy, not just here, but everywhere else as well. Now, had the government funded local councils more equitably, we wouldn't be where we are today. Over 50%, well, getting on for 50% of our income now is fees and charges. It never used to be the case. And as for this particular issue, we are needing to go with the officer's recommendation, because if we try to square the MTFS, we are looking for at least £500,000 a year of revenue. It's a gamble, but I suspect we will have to take that gamble. Otherwise, we don't have access to other sources of income to remedy that. So I hope members will be able to agree that we have to go with the officer's recommendation on this and review the situation as we go forward in the future years. And as for the increase in parking charges year on year, leaving it for 5 years and ending up with a 28% increase is unconscionable. We've got to be prepared to develop a mechanism to do this more regularly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Capozzi.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from Councillor Stevens, parking tariffs haven't risen now. It's got to be 5 years, because we've been talking about this for 16 months, so it's got to be 5 years now. I challenge anyone to tell me anything that hasn't risen in cost in 5 years. We spoke earlier about reviewing parking charges more frequently. The current process of once every 4 years just isn't sustainable. The market, everything, the world, the economy, everything changes so much and so frequently that more frequent and smaller incremental changes is the better strategy. So a 2-yearly check on this, I think, is the way the council needs to go moving forward. 5 years is a massive gap. We've seen huge inflations. We haven't kept up our income with inflation, and yet we've had to keep our services on the road, sometimes quite literally. I find it really sad when people say, if I have to pay more, I won't go somewhere and I won't support this high street and I won't stop there. If Councillor Williams couldn't drive down to the car park on Old High Street, Hemel, and park there for his breakfast and would have driven away from that local business, I actually find that really quite sad. And I've had residents in Tring say to me, if I have to pay more to park in Tring, I won't go there. And I just think a cup of coffee is like 2 parking price visits to a town centre, which I find astounding. I find really sad for our local businesses if that's how people want to deal with this. Yes, it's a change. It's long overdue. It is financial benefits. People have sort of said, you know, it's all about the money. It is all about the money. We have seen councils go bankrupt in the last 2 years. Where we are financially stable, we have amazing officers who help us maintain that. We as councillors are responsible for ensuring we balance the books. And this is one of the hardest decisions we have to make. But our fees and charges are our income. We have to look at the bottom line on this, I'm afraid. And all our other actions also go towards helping our residents and local businesses as a whole. We have to look at everything as a whole, not in isolation. So I believe this is a strong proposal. Yes, it's got its challenges, but there is nothing this council is going to face in the next few years that is not going to be a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Councillor Gale, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be brief. We've heard these predictions of doom and gloom, this sort of basic economics lesson from politicians, which says if you increase the price, you lower the demand. It's as simple as that. Well, it's never as simple as that. It's a complex system, and it's something that too often politicians do not understand. I don't speak as an economist, but I know enough to know what I don't know. And I seriously doubt that it's just a simple case of simply, if you increase the price, that's it, you'll kill the high street. I grew up in Watford. I left in the 90s, and I haven't really been back much since. When I left in the 90s, the high street was dying. It was notoriously, absolutely falling apart. I went there last week. It was absolutely buzzing. You couldn't find any free parking. The idea of free parking anywhere near Watford High Street is an absolutely complete joke. It's completely unrealistic. I wouldn't expect there to be any free parking anywhere near there. That said, there wasn't particularly free parking in the 90s either. So it's not, what we have to do is not be negative, but we have to invest in making our borough desirable and attractive in its own right, not just cheap. A strategy that says, come to us, you get cheap parking, it'll be cheap, is not satisfactory. And Decorum deserves better than that. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of other people listed. I thought I made it clear we are in the debate period at this point, which means we're only speaking once. So I'm afraid that Councillor Williams and Councillor Guest, because you have spoken already, I'm not going to invite you to come back.
Sorry, Chair, can you clarify under what standing order the rule of debate in scrutiny says you can only speak once?
The same standard order that we have in council when
Doesn't apply to scrutiny, Chair.
I'll just look over to Mark and just check, is that...
Chair, there is no formal restriction on the number of times a member can speak, but it's obviously down to you to manage the meeting appropriately. So once you've heard from members, it's a reasonable position, but it's ultimately your decision.
Okay. Right, on the basis that that we didn't have somebody else, I will invite you to come back for a second, but please, if we could try to stay succinct.
So thank you, Chair. I only want to come back on 2 points that were made. One by Councillor Stevens, where he said that the parking report that came out in July 24 was based on a bad report they inherited. I think if I turn to Councillor Symington, who I suspect he trusts to be accurate, her report of July 23 clearly states they inherited a requirement for £100,000 of additional income and a medium-term financial strategy, which seemed a 2% increase in car parking. So the policy that was brought forward in July 23 was not inherited from the previous administration. It was purely brought about by the new administration. And just to clarify from Councillor Capose's point, we did review car parking charges every year as part of our budget setting, but because we recognised the fragility, particularly during and after COVID, of our town centres, we made a conscious decision not to increase car parking charges. We didn't ignore it, we reviewed it and made a decision not to. So it was a policy decision rather than we didn't do anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. I was taught that if you increase the price of something, then you increase the revenue up to a point, and then you increase beyond that point when the revenue, the income drops off because customers are put off. I was taught this not in politics, but by a lecturer at university. In my first year of my pharmacy degree, we had some economics lectures on the basis that some of us may well be opening our own pharmacies, and that was where I was taught that law of economics.
Thank you. Councillor Patson.
I think I must take issue with Councillor Williams on saying it was a new draft proposal in July 2023, because as far as I understand, it was one that was dusted off from the previous administration with maybe a few tweaks. I mean, if there wasn't anything on the stocks from previous administration, what on earth have they been doing for the last 4 years? They could see that inflation was growing tremendously during that period, and they don't appear to have done anything to rectify matters. As far as I'm concerned, the proposals we have now before this committee are really good ones. They're not perfect. No system ever will be perfect, but they seem to have produced a good balance between the various parts of the quorum. And I accept that there are areas where some people may think it's a little bit unfair that we have to park on the high street for the first time, but really that's really pushing it a bit when there's so many towns around the country where they've had to park on the not for free on the high street for a very long time. I think we should go with this, otherwise you're just going to waste more time fiddle-faddling about with the minor problems that have been presented to us, so that we delay matters for several more months, lose income that we should be having, and we may well have the same thing, same kind of arguments here in sometime next year. So I suggest everybody supports proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions on the floor, I'll see Councillor Elliott. Do you have any comments? No. Okay. Just a couple of things from me. The first one, I just want to come in on this comment of basic economics. Councillor Guest, you've remembered your first paragraph of probably the first sentence from the first paragraph of macroeconomics. But while there are lots of other things that go into the price demand formula, the really important thing to it is the sensitivity between price and demand is different for different products and commodities and in different areas. That's known as price elasticity or inelasticity. And the reason why I mention that is I just feel that that's vital for us as ward councillors to be looking at, because I will actually agree with some comments from the Conservative voices that our borough is not uniform in that elasticity and inelasticity. There are certain places for whom the price will not affect, and there were others that will. So, you know, I do think that was a slight oversimplification. Now, I do want to touch on to the initial proposal from summer 2023 that came to committee. Now, I don't want to have back and forth as to who was responsible for that, but I think one thing that hasn't come out in the debate today that I think is rather important is that proposal for all of its faults was based on market data. The officers looked and compared our pricing for parking compared to a number of neighbourhood councils and tried to look through the effect of the similarities of those areas to ours and trying to look at the effects that those price differences had. So regardless of the price change, there has already been an idea of how well those prices would be brought into by people using the services. Now, obviously, we've progressed on quite a lot, so we're still trying to talk about comparing a market review of summer 2023. So one would presume that now, if we did that same market review, it would be suggesting even higher prices. So that market review is not the only thing to take into consideration, but that was the main basis of that report. And, you know, it does have some merit. It needs to be fixed, but it does have some merit. Yeah, those are my points. So I believe it is now time to refer back to Councillor Allen to close.
Well, I think Councillor Douris is making a late bid. Chair.
If I may make one very small point, Councillor Gale referenced Watford. It should be noted that Watford is actually a regional shopping centre. Hemel Hempstead and Dacorum is not. So to make a comparison is to some extent invidious.
Thank you for being succinct. Councillor Allen, and thank you for pointing it out.
Well, I'd like to pick up on the economics that's been talked about. An organisation is only viable if increase of costs are matched by increase in income. And in our case, that's fees and charges. In the last 10 years, the borough has lost 51% of public central government funding. Has gone down by 51%, and costs for the borough in the last 10 years have increased by 38%. The inflationary pressure of recent years is exacerbated in such things because fuel, for example, and of course a lot of our enforcement is done by vehicles, and the pay of lower earners has increased greater than other parts of the economy. Therefore, the parking enforcement regime costs have increased greater than maybe the 28% that overall inflation has been. There's been a lot of talk about minor changes. I accept it would be lovely to try and tease out some of the smaller points that could make a difference, such as allowing breakfast eaters on Old High Street to have not get indigestion. The difficulty with this is that the delay on this decision to go to another traffic regulatory order would be 6 months. And that would be about £250,000 of lost income, a one-off £250,000 loss of income, whilst we go through another iteration of discussions to come up with a new traffic regulatory order and do the consultations that are necessary to support that. In addition, the traffic regulatory order itself costs £50,000. And then if the changes that were put forward by Councillor Williams were to be implemented, there would be an annual loss of income of 200,000. So we're talking about, roughly speaking, £500,000 just for this immediate financial period. I cannot, as portfolio holder, think how we start trying to fill that gap of income at short notice. Of course, you know, if services and employees are to be withdrawn, then that takes time. And we wouldn't be able to do it quickly enough to have an impact on the immediate term. And the thought of having to close down other services to try and meet this hole, or even to draw it down from reserves, I'm afraid is just too unpalatable to consider. And so I'm sorry that these minor changes just are not really viable at this stage. However, this is all part of a place strategy that I've highlighted. It's all part of a process which we will keep a very close eye on. It's all part of a process in which we will want to be as responsive as possible in suspending any parking that is going to be show signs of disadvantaging high street. And we are looking to put in place supportive measures on the high street beyond parking, which are areas that research suggests are important high streets, such as enhancing the open space and enhancing the vibrancy of the high street. And so this is all part of a broader package of tools and support for the high street. And so I do commend it to members.
Thank you. Okay, we're now going to proceed to the voting of this item. Now, just to recap, there are three possible outcomes from a vote tonight. It has been laid out to take this as multiple votes. So the first vote is in regards to option A, that the committee reviews this decision but decides that the content for the original decision to stand, the decision will take effect on the date of the OSC meeting. If that vote passes, then there's no further decisions required tonight. If the vote fails, we would move on to option B, which is the committee referring it back to the decision-making person, in this case, the leader of the council and portfolio holder for corporate and commercial services, setting out the nature of the concerns. The decision makers shall then reconsider the decision within 4 weeks, amending the decision or not before adopting a final decision. If the option is agreed to, the committee will need to summarise the nature of its concerns. Finally, option C would be that the committee may, instead of referring the matter to the decision maker, refer the decision to full council. If this option is agreed, the committee will need to summarise the nature of its concerns and will discuss at the 13th of November full council meeting. Hopefully that is understood. So I would remind that only those members of the committee and those who are substitutes for this evening will be permitted to vote. So we do not have voting set up on our devices, so I will ask for a raised hand. So all those who will be voting for option A, the committee reviews the decision but is content for the original decision to stand, I would ask you please raise your hand now. Okay, I have 7 votes. And all those voting nay, please raise your hands. I have 5 votes. And 1 abstain, okay. And I will just double check. So we may have missed 1 person, as I believe there are 4. Oh, we have a second abstention, okay. So with 7 votes for, 5 against and 2 abstentions, the decision has been taken of option A. So thank you very much. Just a quick call. Does anybody require a comfort break before we resume the meeting with our next item? I've had a couple of nods from officers, so if we can come back in 10 minutes, please. I will resume. I will offer to go back to my normal way of chairing a meeting, but I can't take the clerk glasses off because otherwise I won't be able to see anybody. We will go immediately into agenda item 8, the Q2 performance report, corporate commercial, and welcome to Catherine.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the standard quarterly performance report for corporate and commercial. We'll take it broadly as read, but I will hand over to each of my team members to give a quick summary of their service areas, and then we'll open up for any questions. So Ben, over to you first.
Thank you, Catherine. There isn't anything in particular I'd like to say about my services performance. However, I just want to pick out under section 2.1 that under procurement transformation, the governance new procurement regime under the Procurement Act 2023 has been delayed and will not go live until February 2025 instead of the October date. Thank you, and over to Mark.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, Chair, similar vein really. I'll keep it brief, but obviously usual Q2 highlights there. The big thing for my service seems like a long time ago now, but was the general election in July, which was obviously a massive achievement for the team, and I think generally went really well. So, but other than that, happy to take any questions.
Just to pick up on the Finance and Resources Performance Report in section 4 of the report in front of you. There are 8 KPIs for this service area, 6 are green, 2 are red. The 2 red KPIs have maintained from the previous quarter. One of them is around the average time taken for debtors to pay. The performance has vastly improved and we are very close to being on target, and I hopefully will be on target by Q3. And we have had our best performance for 18 months during August. So the team is performing well, but just very narrowly short the target. And in terms of capital variances, I will pick that up as part of the Q2 finance report.
Thank you very much. So we will open the floor to questions, and Councillor Duris is feeling right at home.
If I may, briefly again, paragraph 3.3, electoral services and the register. Quite a number of changes in the additions and deletions. Do we know whether that's because of people moving into the borough, or is it due to people passing away and not being able to vote?
I don't have that exact data. I suspect that the number's higher than usual due to the upcoming general election in the lead up to that period, where you get obviously a lot more interest in registrations and changes. Everybody suddenly checks that they're registered correctly. So I'm sure that's what drove those high numbers.
Good answer.
Thank you. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. The KPI, time taken for debtors to pay, that there's strong performance on this target, and you're hoping that it's going to be on target next time this comes to committee, but it is still in the red at the moment. What's going to be done between now and the next time this comes to committee to get it into the amber or green?
So over the last 2 months, they would be on target. So from that perspective, if they can maintain the performance of the last 2 months, we will be on target in Q3. So I think the service have done a huge amount to do that. You know, commercial debtor days are at 63 days and have been higher than that since COVID, and that is the vast majority of our debt. So it is a very, very difficult target, and deliberately a hard target to achieve, and one that we have been nowhere near since pre-COVID. So if we can continue the performance in August through October, November time and up to Christmas, then from that perspective, I think we will be on target for the first time in several years. And that is credit to the service. You'll see the long narrative in the appendix A lot of work is being done, a lot of additional resources, but it is a bit of a chicken and egg. We do not want to hit our commercial rent debtors so that they close their shops and move out. But equally, we want to make sure that we do get the income that is due to us. So it is a little bit of chicken and egg. As I said, we want to get that income in. We want to maintain those income levels. We want to achieve that target of 51.7 average, but we want to do it in a way that's sustainable for the high street.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens.
I noticed that thank you, Chair. I noticed that there's a strong reference here about the household leaseholder related debt is the largest single sector. Would it help if we were to break it out so that the leaseholder debts are reported separately? Because the conventional debtor days, I suspect, would be pretty good.
So we're reviewing several items in here, and we've got a revised council debt policy that will go through to Cabinet in the next few months, which is looking to identify our commercial debt and our leaseholder debt separately, and also looking to change some of the policies so that we deal with them very differently. Just for wider information for the committee, leaseholder debt is where we have undertaken works on properties and we charge leaseholders for their element of those costs, and they can be quite significant, particularly in the last few years where construction costs are significantly higher. And equally, we have undertaken a huge amount more work in the last couple of years, so there's more volume as well as higher individual unit costs, and we are looking at that, and we'll probably will come back to committee over the next few months around how we report that.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll just throw one complicated question through to yourself, Mark. So we've got obviously a number of effective KPIs on what the licensing team have done. I am just wondering what sort of oversight we've got on the licensing team in terms of the amount of cost and effort that they are making on each investigation and each application. Obviously, as you know, I'm particularly concerned where we've gone to great lengths and great expense in certain areas that have sort of wound up not changing from earlier positions. So it's trying to determine whether we are having conversations about what the objectives are of the team when they are opposing or investigating licenses.
So review of individual cases is carried out at a service level through the team officers, and then obviously onto myself if there's something more complex which requires advice, and onto Catherine if I require some assistance further up the chain. So that's how we review complex cases on a day-to-day basis. Overview of the service and the policy setting is carried out by the licensing committee. So that provides that direct oversight in terms of its policies and how they apply those policies.
So the suggestion would be if you've got a complex, we'll call it a complex case, there would be input from yourself and or Catherine before sort of making, shall we say, substantial or abnormal costs and effort in sort of asserting the council's position on something. It wouldn't just be the team themselves wouldn't be able to do that without your approval.
So obviously on more routine matters, they deal with the day-to-day stuff. If it's complex or contentious, then they would refer to me for advice. And we would sit down and consider it. If we needed to get external advice because it was a particularly complex matter, we'd also do that. Counsel's opinion, etc. if it was a tricky legal issue. So there's that internal review process. And in most licensing decisions as well, there's a right to appeal. Some matters go on to the committee for final determination, or eventually onto the court if the applicants are still not happy with decisions.
Okay, thank you. If we have no further questions, we'll thank the officers and we'll move on to the next item. And guess what? We're straight back round to Catherine.
Thank you. I'll pass over to Nigel for the next one on the financial monitoring report.
So in front of the committee, the Q2 financial report. I'll take it as read and just pick out some of the high level positions. In terms of the general fund, we are in a strong financial position with a surplus circa 650,000 reported at Q2. And I'm pleased to say that the HRA, that's been undergoing significant challenge in recent years, is at the moment showing a balanced budget. Obviously, those two positions are made up of various different variances that are outlined in the report. And hopefully members can see that there are certain areas that are creating a pressure for us, and it's not just ourselves in terms of local authority. Temporary accommodation is a significant pressure for the whole sector, and something that was a main focus in the government's budget only a few days ago, and hopefully going forward is something we will look to get additional government support on. Other areas are around environmental services, and that includes car parking in terms of some of the delays linked to car parking tariffs, and also around property services, particularly some of the rental agreements for the forum that have now been signed and agreed, but have meant that limited income is going to get received during this financial year. But a strong showing for next year is indicated already. The one big number in terms of variance is obviously our treasury and investment returns, which is showing a surplus on budget of 2.1 million, which is significant. But I would remind this committee that is over £1.2 million down on last year. As we are seeing our cash balances come down, and as we've seen the initial interest rate reductions, which are expected to continue, I expect that to continue to decline to a level around about budget for 25-26. Other than that, I will open up to questions on the report or any issues that members would like to raise.
Thank you. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. On paragraph 1.3, that's on page 56 and 57, slippage relating to the verge hardening, is that due to the criteria being set and requests being assessed against it, or are there any other causes of the delay? Because those of us who've submitted verge hardening requests, it's because there's parking pressures in those particular wards, in those particular roads. We just want to see it done.
So that was the delay in getting the overall policy approved that went to Cabinet last month, if I remember correctly. And once that's been approved through Council as well, then that will look to assess the some 40 or so applications that the service have got. So they are expecting those works to start now, because they've got a matrix around assessing those and assessing the criteria and also the order in which they'll do them. But it has been a delay up to this point.
Any further questions? Okay, Nigel, two quick ones from me, hopefully easy. I just want to check with regards to the favourable Treasury income. I am working on the basis that we will have one more quarter of favourable Treasury income, but the figures for next year will have a reviewed target number. So while we will still see some returns on Treasury income, we won't expect to see favourable variances.
So again, the projections in here show the year-end expectation. We have allowed for the market expectations of a couple of interest rate reductions over the next period to the end of the financial year. And as people will realise from looking at the capital report, we are at the moment on track to spend £68 million of our capital. So again, our cash balances are looking to go down. Bearing those two things in mind and what's included in the MTFS, the expectation is that we will be down to our MTFS expected Treasury management income levels for 25-26. If cash balances remain higher or interest rate reductions don't happen, then we may have a favourable position next year, but we're not expecting that at this moment in time.
Thank you. And then my other question is just in regards to the variance on the place line. So in our table, we've got an adverse variance of 221,000, but in item 5.4, where we explain that, we only mention 50,000 of that, and then a line just saying there are other smaller pressures across place. I just wanted to double check. Is that correct? Are we saying that there is 170,000 of various smaller ones that we haven't described, or is there possibly a mistake on that explanation?
So there is as the report alludes to in paragraph 5.4, there is a £50,000 pressure directly linked to place, and the residual £80,000 pressure is other variances across the service area. So if you look at paragraph 5.3 as well, it outlines the filming shortfall of 70,000 as well. So you'll see that they relate to the table above.
So I had read that 5.3 related to the people and transformation shortfall, which is the 80,000, but then it's the place underneath it.
You are correct. I've misstated there. So the 50,000 and the place is around the business centre income, and the remaining 170 is smaller variances that are lower than 50,000. I can provide a summary of those. As you can imagine, a £100 million turnover, we tend to set a line in terms of the variances that we report.
Yeah, I thought it may have been because it was under it. It just read a bit strange that you've got sort of less than a quarter of it explained and the rest dropped into sundry. Okay, do we have any further questions? Right, okay, thank you. Oh, no, Councillor Allen.
No, this is for the next item.
Oh, okay, right. So we will close off agenda item, is it 9? Let's go, right. Yes, that was item 9. So now we will move on to agenda item 10, mayoral service arrangements, and this will be introduced by Councillor Allen.
No, it won't. I'm declaring an interest. I am a trustee of Community Action Decorum, and I have had nothing to do with the drawing up of this document and will not comment or discuss within this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for the declaration. Councillor Duras.
I will, if I may, speak later on, but I am also a director, independent director of HITS, which is part of Community Action Decorum.
Thank you. Just as a point, because I do not believe that we are voting on this item, we are merely discussing and noting, if I'm correct, Mark. We will ask you to declare an interest if you didn't do so before, but it's not going to preclude you from contributing. Councillor England.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this report is a relatively minor consideration in financial scale and priorities for this council, but we are talking about the first citizen of the borough here. This is a piece of work which pulls together some of the things which have changed with the mayor already, the car and some of the attendant arrangements that we have, but also it clarifies and changes the fundraising role of the mayor, insofar as the mayor actually had a fundraising role up until now. It's been the convention that the mayor chooses a charity and that there is some talk of the amount of money that has been raised, and indeed there is an official dinner throughout the year. But it has been the case that the mayoralty and the ability of the council to support the mayoralty in the fundraising that goes on has been something that we as an administration wanted to change, and that really wasn't particularly working as well as it could under a different model. So this is a meeting of the strengths of the first citizen position and presence, and it's the opportunity to harness the fundraising creativity and the available fundraising resources of the voluntary sector in all of its diversity, not just the bigger charities. Charities via Community Action Decorum will now properly do the fundraising. They'll ride the robes and clink the chain in order to suitably honour the role while adorning their multiple and varied events which they can bring forward by their networks and outreach. So the hope here and the expectation is that by being able to engage with the fullest amount of different charities and different people who want to do things, the mayor can lift that to another level, and we can do a much better job of fundraising for many, many needy causes going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take the report as read. Do we have any questions or comments from the floor? Councillor Douris.
Thank you very much. Well, I am 1/3 of a trio in the chamber who have been the mayor of Dacorum. A couple of points. First of all, on a technical basis, item 4.2, I think there's an omission there that you've not included the Holocaust Memorial Day, which has also been attended by the mayor, and it's very appropriate, especially in these days, that we should recognise Holocaust Memorial Day. That's the first thing. The second one is with regard to, just as a point of context, at item 4.9, I have the unique that's the wrong word, the unique situation that I was mayor for 2 consecutive years and the only mayor to have actually done that, as a result of which, although one of the years in a sense was a COVID year, I did actually raise £20,000 in my time as mayor. And I raised that for Sunnyside Rural Trust. And this leads me on to my main point with regard to the Mayor's Future Fund. I think that there is a gap in your proposals, which is unfortunate insofar as it restricts, it seems to me, the opportunity for the Mayor to support a particular charity that he or she may have a particular relationship with for any number of reasons within the borough. And even if it's raising £10,000 a year, the dilution of that £10,000 to a number of smaller charities, worthy though they may be, is absolutely fine. But I think it needs, this particular proposal needs to have an item in there, a caveat in there, that allows the mayor, whoever that may be, on an individual basis to nominate a charity of their choice for the benefit of the money that they raise or the charity raises in conjunction with the mayor. I'm disappointed that that opportunity has not been included. I would, if I may, if it's at all possible, like to see that included going forward. And I'd be very interested to hear the comments from my other 2 ex-mayors who are in the chamber, and who, one of which I think did subscribe to the concept of the MFF, the other one I think didn't, because he predated it. So I think I'm going to stop there, but I would urge, if I may, I would urge that to be included. And there is a slight curiosity in terms of item 5.1, where it makes reference to a budget is agreed usually as reserves draw down. And I'm a bit worried about the use of the word reserves, because it makes me wonder whether, if the reserves start to actually diminish, whether the budget would then also be diminished. And that would be unfortunate in terms of the support for the mayor from the in-house team. Bearing in mind that the mayor is the first citizen of the borough, and it shouldn't be forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor England, do you want to respond, or do you want to hold responses to the end? Because there were a couple of questions there, especially in regards to the payment out of reserves.
Chair. Certainly my view in terms of what Councillor Duras was mentioning about giving the mayor the ability to select one charity as part of perhaps a wider range of charities throughout the year. There's nothing to date which would necessarily preclude that from happening. It's supposed to be quite a flexible arrangement and open up the arrangement to different charities throughout the year. So we haven't worked through the exact detail yet. We're looking to develop a service level agreement, but we could look to build in that type of flexibility, and I certainly wouldn't have a problem with that.
Thank you. Any supplementary?
I would offer my voice if you are going to discuss this, and if the leader of the council agrees, I'd be very happy to sit in and be part of any discussions going forward, purely on the basis of my historical knowledge.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams. Oh, no.
There was a second question about the reserves budget.
Yeah, in terms of the council-wide events service, it is looked at during budget setting every year, and it's drawn down from reserves because it often changes year on year in terms of what's required. It has been funded through reserves for the last few years, and that's something that I believe the current administration will want to continue. In terms of if reserves were depleted to a point where that would be a struggle, well, we would have to look at that as part of our financial decision making on an annual basis. But this is a relatively small amount and is something that the previous and past administrations have very much supported.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of observations and then a question. Firstly, I'm disappointed to see the mayoral car being reduced to courier van. I think that's not the appropriate use for a car. If you want to lug parcels around, we ought to keep a parcel van for that. And I like our traditions. I'm very disappointed to see the suggestion here, and certainly would oppose the suggestion here that the mace bearer no longer processes the mayor into full council. I think that's part of our ceremonial role as the mayor, and I'm disappointed to see that being suggested for what a reason I don't really understand. It can't be financial because the costs are minimal. My main question relates to the MFF, which if you read this report, you would think is something that's being suggested to be set up now. But my understanding was this was announced by the mayor on his appointment in May 2023. So my question is, what has happened to the MFF? Where's the money that's been raised? What's it been spent on? I suspect we don't have the answers to those questions this evening, but I would appreciate a very detailed response in terms of every pound raised and every pound spent. I'm also, the report seems to imply, whether I'm reading it right, that we'll have no real responsibility for how that money is raised or how it's spent or even to whom it's allocated. That seems like a derogation of the council's duties if it's being raised in the mayor's name. And what's the comeback if we are not happy with any particular organisation they wish to grant to? It seems to me that CAG will have complete discretion over how the money is spent, and that doesn't feel appropriate to me, but I'd welcome the answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly the intention for the service level agreement will be to set out and agree the terms upon which the money would be spent and the council's involvement in that process and the selection of charities as well. So that detail is to be developed, but the service level agreement is intended to be the sort of the backbone of that agreement. Together with a right to terminate the arrangement if we're not happy with how it's working. So if we do have concerns about how funds are being allocated, we'll ultimately have that right to terminate the agreement and take a different approach if that's required. But there will be tight controls through regular audits, financial reporting, etc., to ensure we get that required oversight.
Any supplementary?
Well, I suppose I welcome that, but I mean, I didn't answer the first part of the question about whether we could have details of the last 18 months, but also does that control over how the grants are made, does it include a veto? So if there's a terminating the agreement, if you're not happy with what they're doing is one thing. What I was seeking was if there, would we be able to veto particular grants before they're made if we don't think they're appropriate?
Mark, you able to give an answer on those two?
Yeah, as I said, the detail hasn't been worked out exactly how that will work in terms of the selection process. We will have to have a decision-making process and a sort of deadlock provision if it comes to failure to agree. So we will build all that in and ensure the council is sufficiently protected. In terms of finance that's been raised in the last year, we can certainly, I need to obviously provide that detail, and we can look into that and respond in writing.
Yeah, if you just follow that up with a response to the committee offline. I'll just say you've pretty much answered the question that I had, which is very similar to Councillor Williams. I have absolutely no concerns with community action decorum being identified as a partner for this, but I do think that our structure needs to be sort of set up that we have the MFF as one thing, and then the partnership with CAD is sort of additional to that, so that there is a way that that could be reviewed and we could use somebody else should we wish to. So we've mentioned about it, a way to terminate and a way to move away. Councillor Adeleke.
Thank you, Chair. I think to say I'm gutted is putting it very mildly, and I think Councillor Doris have actually said everything that I need to say. Just a couple of questions to this proposal. I cannot get exactly why the whole thing is being watered down. And the second point is, if we look at all the boroughs that have mayors, I mean, it's a ceremonial constitutional rule, not a political rule. So why these changes are coming in, I just don't understand it. If we look at all the other boroughs with their mayor, how the mayor role is held, especially in London boroughs, they are upping their game, not watering it down. So I just can't understand why we are touching what has been the flagship of this borough. I don't understand it. I wish the officers can perhaps enlighten us. Yes.
I'm not really sure that's an officer question, so I'll come to Councillor Allen, who's waiting to speak, and he may be able to respond to that.
Yes, so to respond to Councillor Duris's question, seeking my views as a former mayor, this has come about not only because of the borough not having the capacity to support the mayor's fundraising activities, but because the voluntary sector struggles to have the capacity. The borough was getting increasingly caught up with delivering the fundraising because the selected charity didn't necessarily have the capacity. I think Councillor Duris benefited from the magnificent energy and fundraising skills of Mrs. Siddiqui Charlick. And I'm not sure that every charity has got that sort of dynamism. And the idea of making it a more general fund was something that came from the voluntary sector, because voluntary sector fundraising teams have usually got a program of events already lined up for the year. They've got their volunteers, and it was a pressure and a struggle for them to deliver additional things on behalf of the mayor. So this is, actually something that the voluntary sector raised as being a matter of concern for them. That it's lovely to be appointed as the chosen charity for the mayor, and they love the profile raising that is achieved by that, but they often struggle with meeting the you know, having the capacity to meet the, you know, the expectations of the mayor, increasingly in these hardened times.
Thank you. Councillor Adeleke, any supplementary?
I think I just want to respond to Councillor Allen because I've not been party to how all this was put together. But I was mayor. I raised a lot of money. The charity that I see, it's up to the mayor to select his charity and to make sure that that charity has the capacity to support the program that that is in place. I think Councillor Doris, I think you have some aside.
Sorry?
Your charity.
Challenge?
No, your charity when you were mayor.
I had a meal.
Hmm?
Sorry.
So I should be talking to you. I think I had Ian Rainey as my charity when I was mayor, and before I appointed them as my charity, we laid out your program, how the fund was going to be raised, who was going to do what, and everything. And I didn't have any problem. We raised over £40,000. I didn't have any issue at all. So I am still remain puzzled about why there is issue now.
Noted. We'll come back to Councillor Duris.
Oh, right. Okay, thank you. First of all, I should just mention, Councillor Allen was very kind to refer to Sunnyside Rural Trust, who did give a great deal of support. But officers here will also remember my two daughters going around extracting vast quantities of money from various people, various officers as well, dressed as health and safety and ducks and all manner of crazy things. So it's a two-way stretch. On a serious point, though, I am concerned, and I've not made any reference to any service level agreement because of the interest that I have. However, I am very concerned about the recommendations contained here in the light of the mayor's role within the community and the importance of the mayor. As I've said, the mayor is the first citizen of the borough, and I just feel that it is being squeezed, if that's the most appropriate way, in a number of different directions. And Councillor Williams has highlighted 2 or 3 of those as well. So in the recommendation, although you've said, Chair, that there doesn't need to be a vote, recommendation 2 actually delegates authority to the Assistant Director, etc., to oversee, to finalise the service level agreement and oversee the operation of the MFF. I'm concerned about that, and I'm also concerned about some of the other elements to this, this paper, and I would actually like to see the paper not noted tonight, but to come back, having considered carefully the question of the mayoralty. It is something that we should be very proud of in this country, and that we do ourselves a grave disservice if we reduce it to just a tick box operation. So that I know I'm not a member of this particular panel or this committee, but that would be my sincere recommendation, that we don't agree the recommendations and it comes back having had due consideration. If needs be, possibly even a topic group.
Thank you. Where are we? Councillor Capozzi. I'll come back to Councillor Allen because he's sort of responding.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chair. I thought I had another person to get by. Okay. First of all, I agree on the reduction of the mayor's ceremonial parts and sort of like the watering down of it. I find that disappointing as well. I don't think in a council meeting it's particularly overpowering, but it's quite nice to see and stick with the traditions and stuff. So I actually, I feel that's quite disappointing. With regard to the MFF, I understand and I like the premise of a fund where smaller charities can take a share of the money that the mayor's name helps raise during a year and maybe wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity because they're not the named charity of the year. So I quite like that premise. But I am aware that when the MFF was first proposed, and officers were asked to review different ways of funding it and structuring it and administering it, their original paper came back to the administration with a not recommended to basically contract it out to CAD to do, for want of a better expression. And I'm just wondering now if officers have rewritten their recommendations, and that's why this has now got into a formal paper, and they are now actually recommending CAD to administer the fund.
That sounds like a question for yourself, Mark.
Sure. There was certainly some original scoping papers. It wasn't a formal committee report. It was just to make sure we were getting all the considerations out there before we could finalise a report. And some of the issues raised were around the governance and how we'd oversee the fund. And on the back of that, the SLA, detailed SLA was developed as the idea to overcome that. And officers will be putting that work in if the principals agreed to take that forward. So yes, but it was a very early scoping paper that's been developed, and officers now come forward with this recommendation, which is supported by the portfolio holder, Peter.
Okay, thank you. I think too that these kind of changes and the introduction of the MFF is a much wider decision than just a noted paper, and it's potentially something for debate at full council.
Yeah, I'll let Mark just comment on what the procedure is, but this is part of review notes.
Yes, Chair, just to be clear, this will go on to Cabinet for a decision in terms of the fund. It's not a council decision. It's not changing anything in the Constitution, or to be honest, anything too significant. It's about just fundraising for the Mayor, obviously a very important function, but one that will come before Cabinet with the feedback from this committee.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Weston.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, can you just rewind? Did you say it's not going to come to full council for approval? No, that was my...
The cabinet decision.
And then in the cabinet decision, then it will go to full council, will it?
No, it's not
it
a
won't come to
it's
full
not a
council
referral.
at all.
No.
Okay, so coming on for me then, what I'm led to believe, as Councillor Kaposi said, this has been going on for the last 18 months. And it's been come backwards and forwards to the administration with the agreement of it not performing, because the officers felt monies raised were not going to be sufficient enough for CAD to perform the role they want to perform. What I can't understand, being a mayoral chair of a council, why the mayor cannot appoint more than one charity. It doesn't have to be just one, why the mayor can choose more than one charity in their year of office. I also am led to believe that the mayor can raise funds any other way the mayor would like to raise funds, like Councillor Doris has done in the past. I've done it in the past. I also understand that this report is very time consuming. It needs to be broken down, and I'm very concerned, and I'd like to know more about how is the mayor going to be involved with CAD, with raising money for charities, because that's quite a big role, especially in quite a few paragraphs. It says here that the resources will not be used by our resource team. And the other question I do know of one is that if CAD are aware are going to take this on, then charities will be expected to apply for the monies, just like charities do now. So it won't be up to the mayor to choose the charity. It will be charities applying for some of this money, and then the committee will get together. A committee will be set up, and the committee will get together, and they will decide which of those charities that have applied for some of this money it goes to. So I'm not happy with this paper whatsoever. That's just my, any questions answered on that one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Not sure there are any questions to respond to. I think that's general feedback on the paper. So we'll move to Councillor Silwell.
What is the title of these reports? It's missing, actually. That's the reason. Yeah, it's missing there.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of comments from me rather than questions. We've got Councillor Lakey.
So, sorry, Chair, sorry to interrupt. Just one question. Do we know any other council that has gone the way that our council is trying to go?
It's a good question. Mark, William, are you able to answer?
Yes, St Albans have I'm not sure what they call it, but they have a community fund or a mayor's fund or something or other.
I direct the question to you. When did this start, please? When did this start? Yeah.
I think it's been going on for a number of years.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was just going to make a comment. I'm sure this is well known to a lot of you because I'm sure you have trustee roles in a number of local charities as well. In the last 6 or 7 years, the charity environment in the UK has changed drastically. There is a huge sort of falling out of what I would call general or unrestricted charitable funds. So a lot of small charities are finding themselves in the situation that Councillor Allen has described, where they simply do not have the internal resources to dedicate towards fundraising. So it is a lot harder for smaller charities rather than sort of the more established ones to be able to keep some of their basic functions going. Although it's more competitive in getting grant applications out there, grant applications generally come in for specific projects. You need to be able to turn around to somebody and say, I'm going to do this incremental thing rather than just, I want to keep my doors open. While I very much applaud, I don't want to take anything away from the outstanding efforts that previous mayors have had. I do just want to say, from the pure charity point of view, the environment is different. And I'm not saying anything that your tactics wouldn't work in the current day. I'm just saying it is different. And I find this in many of my roles at the moment, and it's very much a struggle. So I can certainly understand the desire where a number of charities will want to pull together on something like the Mayoral, the Mayor's Forward Fund in order to kind of get the support on some of that basic fundraising. The other thing I just want to point out was some of the comments that have been made about shall we say, the ceremony around the Mayor's position and the formality. I completely respect and understand the value in the tradition and the history, but I want to point out that the formality is a barrier to some people of being involved in council proceedings. In some cases, it removes accessibility. Not everywhere, and there are going to be some people that find it the formality and the tradition and the ceremony a great thing and a comforting thing. There are others that don't particularly want to get involved. We can also talk about, dress at a council, full council, etc., and the way that we address each other and we present things. Everybody's going to have a personal opinion on that. The comments that came out, I thought only looked at one side. I just want to point out, for those of us that want to bring a teenager along to a council meeting, for example, you know, my suggestion is that our teenagers probably don't like the ceremony of leading the mayor in. Some might, but I'm just suggesting that some won't. Okay, and with that, we'll move on to Councillor Allen.
Yeah, on the St Albans, it's called St Albans Fund for the Future and was founded in 2001. But to respond to, it's really following on from your point, Councillor Freeman. A lot of the charities, or one of the other dimension with the charity sector that I became aware of during my tenure was that there's few charities that have the capacity that you describe, Councillor Adeleke. And as a result, those charities keep being chosen again and again. So there's a very small pool of charities that benefit from the mayor's fundraising. And within the sector, that is, you know, seen as not really being very equitable. And given what Councillor Freeman just said about pressures on charities getting even harder, that pool itself is even struggling and talking about not having the capacity to really support the mayor in the way that it used to. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments? Okay, so there have obviously been some points noted to that, which will be part of the report as it proceeds to Cabinet, and the Cabinet members are obviously aware of this debate. So thank you very much. We will now note that report and move on to our final item, which is our work plan, with only one additional item, as we discussed earlier tonight. I'm assuming we have no comments on the work plan going forward. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you still managed to catch a firework.